Long before freedom rang across America, a quiet hero in Philadelphia took up his pen not to write speeches or laws, but to record the names and stories of the brave. His name was William Still, a man whose compassion, courage, and careful record-keeping helped hundreds escape the chains of slavery, and whose writings would preserve the soul of a movement known as the Underground Railroad. In the mid-1800s, slavery was the engine of America's economy. Cotton built empires, and human lives were the fuel.
When we talk about the wealth of the South, we're talking about wealth in enslaved human beings. In fact, those enslaved human beings in the pre-Civil War period range, depending on the year, between 15 and 20% of the total wealth in the U.S. That means that enslaved people are worth more than all the factories, all the stocks and bonds, and all the currency combined.
When you look at how the economics of slavery translated into the general economy of the nation, then you can see that slavery was not just some sideshow in American society. It was the main event in American history.
Families were torn apart, children sold, mothers whipped, and fathers shackled. Yet, in the shadows of this brutality, a network of ordinary people, black and white, risked everything to help enslaved men and women find their way to freedom. It was a secret route of hope known as the Underground Railroad. William Still was born free in 1821 in New Jersey. The youngest of 18 children, his parents, Levin and Charity Still, had fled slavery in Maryland years earlier, but during that escape, Charity was forced to make an unthinkable choice, to leave behind two of her sons. One of them, Peter, was sold into the Deep South. William grew up hearing his mother's cries for the children she lost, a pain that would guide her purpose for the rest of her life.
Of all the reasons to run, the beatings, the hard labor, the starvation diet, none compare to the breaking apart of family.
Now you can recover from the whippings, you'll have the scars, but when your children are taken from you, when your family is taken from you, that's a longing that can never be resolved. That's a longing that becomes embedded in who you are, part of your personality. So they feared that. That was the most powerless place to be, was on that auction block.
By the 1840s, William Still moved to Philadelphia, a city pulsing with abolitionist energy. He joined the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society and soon became the head of its Vigilance Committee. From his small office, Still provided food, shelter, and safe passage to freedom seekers.
He was helping something in the neighborhood of 60 slaves a month to escape, to go farther north, sometimes all the way to Canada, from their runaway point in the South.
He kept detailed notes on every person he met, their names, families, origins, and how they escaped, knowing one day those records might help reunite loved ones separated by slavery.
It was an incredible risk to maintain these records about people he was helping to escape, because it condemned both of them. It condemned him to being actively involved, and it condemned them and confirmed that they were escaping, stealing their labor from their owners.
Each entry was an act of defiance. The Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 made harboring runaways a federal crime.
The Fugitive Slave Law was probably the most vigorous kind of exercise of the power of the federal government within the United States. It overrode all these laws that the northern states had passed. It made it a federal crime to try to obstruct the capture of a fugitive slave, or even to refuse to assist If a federal marshal comes up to you and says, hey, I'm going after that fugitive and you got to come and help me, and you say, no, I don't really think I want to do that, you're committing a federal crime.
But still never stopped. He even hid his journals in a graveyard to protect the people whose stories filled his pages. If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps bring more untold histories like this one to light. Still worked alongside legends like Harriet Tubman, raising funds for her journeys and receiving the men and women she brought to Philadelphia. Together, they turned courage into a network. Still also aided famous fugitives like Henry Box Brown, who mailed himself to freedom, and Ellen and William Craft, a married couple who disguised themselves as master and servant to flee Georgia.
Henry Brown is born into slavery in Louisa County around 1816.
Living in Richmond, he was working in a tobacco factory.
Henry's wife, Nancy, is sold to a new owner in North Carolina.
And when his wife was sold, the rules were that the children went with the wife, so he lost his whole family in that sale.
On March 29, 1849, Henry, with the help of two friends, a white shoemaker and a freed black man, climbs into a crate. Henry attempts to mail himself to freedom. Destination, Pennsylvania. The 3-foot by 2.5-foot box is nailed shut with the 5'8", 200-pound father inside.
He shipped himself as if he were a piece of cargo, as if he were a package. And legally, under slavery, he, a human being, was considered property.
The special delivery arrives at the Anti-Slavery Society in Philadelphia the next day.
My heart swelled in my throat. I could scarcely breathe. Great sweats came over me. I gave up all hope, related Brown. We opened the box, wrote McKim, and up rose, with a face radiant with joy and gratitude, one of the finest looking men you ever saw in your life. Brown extended his hand and said, "Good morning, gentlemen."
Henry's getaway causes a sensation. The freed man travels the abolitionist circuit across the Northeast, lecturing crowds on the evils of slavery. But Henry is not out of danger. The Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 forces Henry to move to England, where he remarries and reinvents himself as a performer and magician. Before returning to North America in 1875, Henry publishes 2 autobiographies.
It was one of the most ingenious and famous acts of self-emancipation.
Brown and his family eventually settle in Toronto, never returning to his native Richmond.
Through each success and each risk, William Still's small office became one of the busiest stations on the Underground Railroad.
I mean, you realize that for a period of time, he was helping something in the neighborhood of 60 slaves a month to escape, to go farther north, sometimes all the way to Canada, from their runaway point in the South.
Then, in 1850, a miracle walked through his door. A weary man named Peter arrived in Philadelphia, having bought his own freedom after decades of slavery in Alabama. As he told his story, his birthplace, his mother's name, Charity, William's heart stopped. He asked carefully, "Suppose I should tell you that I am your brother?" In that instant, William Still and Peter Still, separated for 40 years, embraced for the first time. Their reunion symbolized everything William had fought for. Their families broken by slavery could be made whole again. Peter later raised enough money to buy freedom for his wife and children, completing the circle of liberation that had begun with his mother's daring escape. After the Civil War, William Still published his secret journals as a book, The Underground Railroad Records, nearly 800 pages of first-hand accounts, 649 names, faces, and stories of those who had risked everything for liberty. It was one of the first major historical works written by an African-American author, and it ensured that the voices of the enslaved would never again be silenced.
Years later, when Charles was a grown man with a family of his own, he was in a used bookshop in Philadelphia where a ragged old book caught his eye.
The cover was torn. I had it rebound since. It said Underground Railroad. And I opened the book up, and there was a portrait of William Still. And lo and behold, the next page I opened to was 488. And I was thunderstruck when I read that arriving from Sussex County, Delaware, in 1858, Jacob Bloxam, George Allagood, Jim Allagood, and George Lewis. They arrived and he told their story to William Still.
His records later helped reunite families, trace lineages, and stand as a permanent monument to courage. In the years that followed, Still continued fighting for equality, leading campaigns to integrate Philadelphia streetcars and founding the city's first black YMCA. When he died in 1902, newspapers called him the father of the Underground Railroad. Today, his home in Philadelphia stands as a landmark. His book is studied around the world, and his example reminds us that the fight for justice is not always waged in the spotlight. Sometimes it's done quietly, with a pen, by a man determined to remember every name that freedom touched.
He didn't invent the Underground Railroad, but he ran arguably the most important or the busiest single Underground Railroad operation in the country. Very, very few people were lost in Philadelphia, thanks to William Still, and in the 1840s and 50s, that's the measure of success. Did you lose people? Were they recaptured? And in Philadelphia, almost nobody.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. That chariot is movement. That chariot is swinging low, picking you up, putting you on that Underground Railroad, taking you somewhere to freedom. So when we sing those songs, it's like, something's getting ready to happen.